So
Okay.
don't worry, you're in safe hands. Safe word is mirror stop.
Let's talk. Let's talk.
Phallocentricity. It's not the same for you and me. Phallocentricity. Warhammer 40K.
So hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm so excited to be joined by Dr. Dan, who I was really excited to meet. It turns out Dr. Dan is an academic with a love of Warhammer and has been doing some research on Warhammer. Hi Dr. Dan.
Oh,
So would you like to just tell us quickly how you got into the hobby?
oh my goodness. The usual way, I guess. When I was a kid, I was into all this stuff. I was into D&D, all that kind of thing. And it's through there used to be this magazine, which of course still exists, called White Dwarf, which at that time was it covered all of the role playing games, and then it gradually became Games Workshop's house magazine and focused on Warhammer. And it was basically through White Dwarf that I came to it.
Love that. I love White Dwarf too. I remember it from yesteryear. Haven't read it recently. And what's your favourite army to play?
I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but Craft World Eldari. I've always identified with the Eldari, and I think possibly the Craft World Eldari the most of all.
Okay. Well, Eldari are also very educated beings. We're led to believe they have universal knowledge through their longevity. And so I want to say thank you again for coming on. So today we're going to, the title of our discussion is Warhammer is Phallocentric, Discuss. So you've kindly agreed and you've prepared notes. Can you show that you've actually... which is potentially a scoop, because if you actually do your study and then, there would have been glimpses of it on this channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the famous timer, the 5-minute timer, and you get to... I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm going to be very well behaved. And if you just would like to talk for 5 minutes on Warhammer is Phallocentric, Discuss, and I'll start your timer now.
Okay, yeah, Warhammer is phallocentric. What do I mean by that? Well, just think about it for a second. What is the most iconic faction in Warhammer 40,000? It's Space Marines. That's what you see if you Google images of Warhammer. If you go and look at the Games Workshop shop, anywhere, you see Space Marines. Space Marines are all men. It's not just that they're all men. They reproduce asexually. So it's not just that there are no female Space Marines, it's that Space Marines actually don't need women in any capacity. They recruit by taking prepubescent boys and implanting organs into them that turn them into huge muscly dudes, basically. And they'll also ensure that they never develop any sexual desires, so they never actually become interested in the opposite sex at all, or even in their own sex in that sense. And the other thing about Space Marines, the bigger the better, right? So, Marines are better than ordinary humans because they're bigger and stronger. And then you've got the new kind of Marines who are better than the old ones because they're even bigger and even stronger. And it kind of carries on. You've got even bigger than the Space Marines. You've got the Custodes who are bigger and stronger, and then you've got the Primarchs who are even bigger and stronger than them, and then you've got the Emperor, who's basically a giant, even though he's also supposedly the historical Alexander the Great and Napoleon Bonaparte, neither of whom were giants. But anyway, the Emperor is enormous. So you've got this real kind of association of size and power and musculature with everything that is valued in the game. And even these aren't big enough though, because you've then got sort of man-shaped machines, which are even bigger. You've got dreadnoughts, you've got knights, you've got titans. They're all kind of shaped like the big, massive blokes with weapons built into them. But then, look at the other factions. I would say originally in Warhammer, the main antagonists of the Imperium were Chaos and orcs. And chaos basically means more space marines. So, you know, and then you've also got the chaos gods, who supposedly have no gender, but in fact they all seem to be male somehow. Apart from the fact that Slanesh is referred to as she who thirsts by the Eldari, they're all basically referred to as men, and as male, and they have male appearance. You know, like Nergal, for example, referred to as Papa Nergal by his followers. He's enslaved an Eldari goddess as his wife. So, you know, so even though they're not theoretically male, they all seem to be male. Iconographically, they're male. Oh yeah, and then you've got the orcs, right? Orcs, much like Space Marines, they reproduce asexually because they're not actually animals; they're kind of fungus, and they reproduce from spores. But even though that should mean that they've got no gender at all, in fact, they all seem to be somehow male. You know, like the orc psychos are called weird boys. They've got masculine features. They're all referred to as he, etc. And again, you know, the bigger the better. The more they fight, the bigger they get, and the bigger they get, the more dominant they are in orc society. Like the small ones are at the bottom of the hierarchy, and they get bigger and bigger. So they've got the war bosses, etc. Then you've got other factions. You've got the ones that Games Workshop is pushing at the moment: Necrons and Tyranids. Necrons used to be living beings, but now they are robots, which are kind of immortal, but also they don't reproduce at all. So they've kind of opted out of that whole kind of cycle of things. And then you've got Tyranids, and they're sort of the exception that proves the rule, because Tyranids are female, but they are also the greatest threat to the galaxy, and they're this sort of monstrous femininity that has to be either destroyed or run away from, because it basically they destroy everything they touch. My goodness, the light's gone off. I'm going to have to keep on talking in the dark.
To the lights.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you've got these sort of Tyranid mothers that are the queens, which are basically just sort of enormous wombs. And then this sort of really kind of monstrous feminine, and then they're sort of avatars on the battlefield. They're these giant kind of tank-like female creatures with weapons growing out of them, and they're literally called dominatrixes. Right. So even where you have sort of femininity being introduced into it, it's in this very particular way. It's like an enormous vagina dentata, for want of a better word. This is femininity that is a threat, and it's got to be kicked out.
Well, thank you so much. Wow, yeah, finished perfectly on the dot there, Dr. Dan. Thank you so much for that. The questions I have. Do you need to regain your lights, or
regain my lights?
So I guess what's the meaning of the word phallocentric? Because I felt, how would you describe it? Because part of how you described it is the enlarging. It's not enough to be a soldier. You need to be a mecha soldier in a Titan. So yeah, maybe let's start with phallocentric.
Yeah, it's about this kind of it's sort of caricature of masculinity. It's not just that the men are the center of the Warhammer universe, which they literally are, because you've got the Emperor, there, who is a guy. It's a particular kind of masculinity. You told me to keep this PG-13, so I'm not sure to what extent I want to.
I mean, I'm absolutely distraught that already where we've gone, but yeah, I do try and keep it like squeaky clean. So.
Yes, but I mean, obviously the phallus is a symbolic piece. That's what it means, and there is an awful lot of this in Warhammer.
Well, and guns are quite of that ilk, right? Guns are quite phallocentric in their own way. Yeah,
not just guns as well, because one of the strange things about Warhammer is it's set in the far future, and technology. They've got technology that we can't even imagine how it possibly works. It's so technologically advanced; it's beyond anything we can think of. And yet, war, which is everywhere, because in the far future there is only war. War seems to boil down to big muscly dudes hitting each other with really big swords and chainsaws and axes and massive hammers and even these gigantic sort of boxing glove things. It's you got melee weapons are actually central to it, and they are enormous melee weapons.
Yeah.
Even the Titans will slug it out, punching each other. Even though they have rockets on them they've got rocket launchers that will fire intercontinental missiles, they still end up punching each other. It's a particularly kind of primal idea of masculinity with a lot of sort of physical fighting and size and domination.
It's true. As somebody that really enjoys unicorns, trying to find my way in the grimdark, all the things that I kind of guess, would read feminine. There's no nature. Every, trees, everything is destroyed. There's just acid rain and urban, there's no gentleness, the only mercy of war is death. Like, there are no soft things. All the edges are hard. And it is that whole sense of mega mask to the nth degree, to creating war machines, and even going bigger than the Titan. Some of the storylines that I've been reading are about the complete destruction of a whole planet, the ultimate kind of crushing. And of course, we're reading the Horus Heresy, which is just really sibling rivalry. Somebody had a great expression for it. It's my favorite fratricide sci-fi series, and of course war. I mean, you don't get a much more masculine setting than that, do you?
You don't. Although with technology, of course, war becomes kind of less and less kind of obviously a male domain as time goes by, because if people are fighting like hand to hand or with clubs or something, then the fact that men are larger and generally stronger obviously makes them more suited to engage in war. But the more that, if you look at modern warfare and you've got things like drone warfare and things like that, there's no particular reason why a drone operator should be a man rather than a woman. And yet, you would sort of expect with technological progress that war becomes less of a male domain. But in Warhammer, it's specifically designed to bring it back into all of that kind of primal brawling and
I should say, as a believer in equality, I think, whoever you are, whatever you describe yourself as, if you want to go out on the battlefield, have at it. And that is a very
controversial. Don't hit each other with clubs anymore. This is,
Thank God. Thank God.
Well, if there was no war going on at all. But yes, it's no longer about sort of brute physical strength in the same way anymore, and it's clearly becoming less so as time goes on.
I mean, I've given this subject such a swerve on my channel because for me, I want to come in as a fan into this arena, and there are some people who may prefer the arena the way that it is, and there are others who don't really mind. But the fact that it is a big topic on the internet about, can Space Marines be female? All of this is kind of tangled up in the setting, which has set out to be so over the top phallocentric, but almost in an ironic way, as a satire of the times, right? So could we talk a little bit about that?
So, I don't think they should retcon Space Marines into a kind of equal opportunities.
The Emperor is not an equal opportunities employer.
No, and that's the point of him. If he was an equal opportunities kind of person, then he probably wouldn't have been such a terrible parent, and the universe wouldn't be quite so grimdark. So don't change that, and it's part of the whole idea of a Space Marine. That is what they are, and it is what it is. But then there are other opportunities to increase female representation within the Warhammer universe. There's I think you mentioned earlier the Sisters of Battle. They're not Space Marines; they're something else, but they are female.
Yeah.
They have different abilities, but they've got their own, they've got their own abilities. You could make more of them. Also, there are other. There are other races in the galaxy. For example, my favourites, the Eldari. They're very. They are definitely an equal opportunities faction in the universe. They are completely kind of gender balanced in everything. You have the Eldar aspect warriors can be male or female. It doesn't make any difference. All of the roles that the Eldar have can be male or female. You could even be creating new races if you really want to, or think of new ways that humans can participate other than being Space Marines and Imperial Guard and Sisters of Battle. And of course, you can have female Imperial Guard. There's no reason why not. I'm just saying that when you've got something which when you've got an aspect of the mythos which is so richly developed and there is so much thought there, and the iconography is so deeply worked out. Don't mess with that thing. Leave that as it is. It is wonderfully broken, and that's the charm of it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think I'm quite lucky because my first few experiences of Warhammer were books written by Dan Abnett, where there are some fantastic female characters in. Beckwin, obviously, one of my favourites. So yeah.
What you mentioned earlier with the sibling rivalry and among the Primarchs, etc. The thing is, you've got that whole, you've got that sort of that family dynamic there. You've got the Emperor and his sons, right?
Yeah.
And although in the lore, there is we don't need to go into that, but there is a female perpetual who is involved in the creation of these and thinks of herself as their mother. But the whole dynamic around the Emperor and the Primarchs is that he's the father and they are his sons, and it's an entirely male family. The mother is not part of that, or the person who thinks of herself as a mother is not part of that. There are no daughters.
We know of.
And about this terrible, and it is a terribly twisted, messed up family. The dynamic is awful, and that is actually the cause of almost everything that's wrong in the Imperium. The Imperium is a horrible place to live. It's not like the Star Trek future. Nobody could possibly want to live in the world of Warhammer 40k. It's horrible. But why is it so bad? It's all.
Tell us why it's so bad, Dr. Dan.
It's basically the Emperor's fault.
He's a bad father.
He's a terrible parent. He was, he had this plan. He was going to have his sons who were going to. They were each going to take after him in different ways, and he had his plan for the role that each of them was going to fulfill. And he had a favourite, and he told everybody who his favourite was, and he's just the worst possible parent. And then this favourite of his, they're not happy. Some of them are not happy with the roles that have been set out for them, and his favourite is kind of a bit spoiled and uppity and gets resentful and rebels against him, and that's actually what ruins everything. His brilliant plan, which should have seen humanity move forward into this kind of utopian state of existence, was ruined basically by his own sort of macho arrogance and by his failure to understand emotionally anything about being a parent.
Failure to nurture.
What's that?
Failure to nurture.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, I think if you start sort of saying, "Oh, we're going to make it equal now. We're going to put in female Space Marine," it kind of destroys that sort of aspect of it as well. It's not that I don't want women in it; it's that you've got something which is the reason it is as grim as it is and as dark as it is because there was that lack of femininity there, because it was all so macho and
Well, I mean, obviously I believe in retconning, so I'm really happy for whatever they choose to introduce, and whatever makes the hobby feel more welcoming and less. But just to continue,
No, but no, sorry.
As someone coming into the hobby, I've been incredibly lucky and have had a lot of generosity from the people that have worked with me and taught me and mentored me. But I feel, of all the arguments, this is the nicest one. The Imperium was absolutely horrific. It's a completely messed up landscape of perpetual war. It's a failure on the part of the Emperor. And the reason for that is because it's just this phallocentric, very male universe. For that reason, if you're then to introduce anything else in, it kind of cracks the concept. So that's like the least offensive, and that's kind of respecting the muse and the intent around the satire and the irony that is the universe. So I respect that point of view. I did not think that you were going to come on here and say that. So I feel a bit like, oh wow, okay, but we can still be friends. It's okay. It's all good.
I hope so.
Let's talk a little bit about the Tyranids, and because when you were speaking about them, it really reminded me of. This is going to drive me mad now. I'm going to forget the guy's name. It really reminded me of Ridley Scott's Alien movies. And not only that, but Ridley Scott's obsession with the mother figure. There was the recent series. No, I have observed, like, for me, when I watch Ridley Scott stuff, he does seem very obsessed by this mother, a female terrifying figure. And, especially in Alien, they look like Tyranids. Geiger's creations are Tyranids, they're very, very similar. And, Raised by Wolves, again, a very recent series where really the mother dynamic comes in, and I find that fascinating. I didn't actually know Tyranids were females, so that's a whole new insight for me. But yeah, that's really interesting.
Because they're sort of technically female. They're like hive insects, like ants or something like that. You've got a queen which is producing more, like a sort of biological machine gun, is sort of producing more and more of these of different kinds. But yeah, although of course the Tyranid Norn queens, they can do more than an ant can, because an ant can only a queen ant can only produce workers and drones and whatever, whereas a Tyranid Norn queen is a sort of biological 3D printer, and can turn out anything. The Tyranids can be of any form.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they can be burst into whichever form is most appropriate for the battle which is to come.
Wow. Well, I mean, I am learning about all the different types of, creatures, xenos, that you can get, but Tyranids are very, very, very low on my list. Certainly Tau and Eldar are up there first.
Yeah, I mean, Tyranids, I think Games Workshop is trying to kind of push Tyranids at the moment, and Necrons, which previously hadn't been part of the... They weren't, as far as I remember, they weren't there when I first went into it. And they seem to be pushing those as a faction at the moment, that they want people to be getting into. So I suppose those will become more important with time. I'm not sure. Yeah,
and I was introduced to Necrons in we read a book for book club all about Necrons, which was a little bit like The Odd Couple, just two Necrons battling through eons and eons of time. So that's quite interesting. But yeah. So I know I only gave you 5 minutes to discuss, but I know you had pages of notes. So was there anything that you didn't manage to get to?
Yeah, I mean, something, let me think, what was I? Yeah, I mean, I was thinking partly, when I was sort of preparing to talk, I was thinking about, actually about something you just mentioned, which was a few minutes ago, which was about, how welcoming the hobby feels. And the fact that, perhaps the lack of the lack of female characters, and how that might make the hobby feel less kind of welcoming to people who are either who don't identify with the very male main factions in Warhammer. I was thinking about that a bit because the whole hobby, wargaming was very kind of male dominated, and in the early days, so was tabletop role playing. But one of the thing is with you take something like Dungeons and Dragons, and it had a place for the feminine from the beginning. It was kind of a stupid place for the feminine because it was basically hot chicks in bikinis. You've got
yes, the famous bikini, the chainmail famous bikinis. Yes,
yes.
Sorcery and Conan and all of that. Yeah.
So there was, and the thing is, that's a male fantasy. So women, there was a sort of place for the feminine in Dungeons and Dragons, because, but it's the place that's given to women by a particular male fantasy, and you see that in the artwork. I've forgotten which one it is, but what is it? The first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. On the front cover, there's a big red devil kind of monster holding a scantily clad woman who's about to be rescued by the men. But then you get female warriors as well, but again they're very eroticized. So it's all kind of women as sort of men of a certain age. Well, men kind of want them to be, and it sort of gave the impression from the beginning that D&D was for 15-year-old boys who are probably too shy to talk to girls, and that image kind of stayed with D&D for a long time. But the fact that there were women in there in some capacity meant that there was a space for that, and as actual female players and creators got into the hobby and took ownership of it and made it their own, the sort of all of the sexism of that disappeared, and you get a more meaningful place for female characters and femininity in the game of D&D and many of the various other role-playing games that have come since then. But the thing about Warhammer is there's not even that. It's like, so it sort of gives the impression it's not, whereas D&D, at least in the early days, it seemed to be for the 15-year-old boys that are too shy to talk to girls. Warhammer has always given the impression of being for 12-year-old boys who don't even want to talk to girls.
That's so controversial.
You look at it, and I think to some extent the Space Marines, they are kind of a wish fulfillment fantasy of that audience to some extent. The thing is with the Space Marines, they are like we said, they're recruited as prepubescent boys, and as a result of their all of this augmentation that goes on, they get to skip out puberty.
Yeah.
So they don't have to go through all of that embarrassing, all of that embarrassing stuff that everybody has to go through when they're a teenager. They don't have to do that. They skip that out. They get put through all sorts of torments, etc. But they get to skip out that, so they don't have to go through all of that that kind of weird uncertainty, which nobody really enjoys at the time. And having skipped all of that out, they emerge the other side as a prepubescent boy's idea of what a man ought to be. Interesting,
yeah.
So you skip all that out, and not only that, but they have this very, very important place in society. The galaxy needs the Space Marine. When you've emerged as a Space Marine, you are a hero. People depend on you. You are able to you are a protector. You are looked up to. You're almost a sort of a walking god, really. And so it's that sort of and of course, it's obviously most of the people that play Warhammer are much over 12 years old. Here I am. I love Warhammer. I'm 47. You love Warhammer. You're a girl. But the thing is, we've all got memory of that time before puberty hit, and being nervous about it and anxious, and just that idea of kind of skipping it out and becoming something powerful and valuable. I think that's a fantasy that kind of still appeals to you even when you've grown up, because you can remember having been in that state. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. I definitely see, the difference in the setups for D&D versus Warhammer. Where one is just a very solid dystopian male-dominated setting, whereas in D&D, because you are intrepid explorers in real life, you're going to come across maidens and damsels that need rescuing, which left that feminine space to be filled by people who then came along and said, let's empower these women. Let's not just make them Yeah. And I think it's an interesting idea about, for example, young men who get into the game and want to feel that power and energy, and it's nothing to do with real life, and it's just about striding into the galaxies, these all-powered space marines, and kicking off and having a massive scrap in space. But yeah, no, it's been really interesting to chat this all through with you, Dr. Dan. I very much appreciate your time. So hopefully you're going to come back on again, and we're going to talk about Eldar. Is that correct?
Yes. Because the Eldar, they really don't get a lot of love, and I kind of understand why, because they're space elves, and elves are really annoying.
Yes.
But
we'll
maybe that's because I'm...
Maybe it's because what?
I said Eldar are space elves, and elves are basically annoying, but I identify them. I don't know why. Maybe that's because I'm annoying. I don't know, but they are the ones that really kind of speak to me.
Oh, well, we'll give them a bit of airtime, because my Arbiter Ian, my Warhammer buddy, is not keen. So it'd be great that I can talk to you about Eldar. And, while you've so kindly come on my channel, is there anything you'd like to plug, or quite often?
No. I'm just here to talk. It's
thank you.
I don't even have a book to sell.
Oh, not yet. But yeah, I would. Anyone?
Yes. I mean, if I was going to plug anything, it would be. I am researching the hobby, Warhammer itself, all of the kind of Games Workshop stuff, but also more generally, and just introductions to people and being able to talk to people would be fantastic. So part of why I'm here, I suppose, is just getting my face out there and getting it known that I'm looking for people to talk to about this stuff. I suppose that's sort of the plug.
Well, that's great, and I would ask people to put in the comments if you'd be happy to just chat with Dr. Dan, and also if you have any topics that you'd like Dr. Dan to cover in an academic way. That is his specialism. Let's make the most of him.
Yes, and I hope they don't just lynch me for saying that the Emperor's a dick. I don't know.
I mean, you can say, it doesn't take much to strike a match. So far on my channel, we've avoided it. You may have destroyed all that. We'll have to wait and see. But it's all good. Well, thank you so much for coming, and speak to you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Phallocentricity. It's not safe for you and me.